Hello, and welcome to the History of Egypt podcast, episode 237, Drinking with Khonsu, or The Dream Book. Back in episode 218, about halfway through Ramesses' reign, we took some time to explore small stories, tales of daily life and concerns among the ordinary folk of Egyptian society. Today, I'd like to bring you part 2, a series of vignettes from life in Ramessid, Egypt. We'll get to know the workers of Deir el-Medina, meet some important characters for our story moving forward, and explore the omens, both positive and negative, to be found in one's dreams. I hope you enjoy. One day, around 1253 BCE, a scribe at Deir el-Medina sat down to work. From his satchel made of linen, he pulled forth a bunch of small pottery shards. They were covered in notes, hastily written documents that recorded work in the Valley of the Kings. Alas, the scribe's dockets were haphazard and disorderly. He needed to organize them. The writer, whose name is lost, grabbed a loose chunk of limestone, about 38 centimeters long, or 14 inches. On the surface of this piece, he began to carefully copy the notes from his pottery shards. They concerned the workers who built tombs in the valley and other parts of the necropolis. More specifically, they recorded their absences. The scribe was collating a year's worth of records about the tomb builders, what days they didn't come to work, and why. The list survives to this day, and it gives fun insights to life in the ancient villages. In the first month of Akhet, the flood season around August, the scribe made a note of several absences. On day 14, the worker Pendua was away, because he was, quote, drinking with Khonsu. That wasn't a euphemism. Khonsu was another worker, named after the god, and on the very same day, the scribe recorded him absent, along with a third man who was also drinking. They weren't skiving off. The manager made a note that Khonsu was, quote, in his celebration, Khebef. It was possibly his birthday or a personal anniversary. Such occasions were a time of celebration with family and close friends. Guests would bring gifts, especially nice food, and celebrate with beer. Parties like this are abundant in the records from Deir el-Medina, which is easily the best preserved settlement and community in all of ancient Egypt. Thanks to records like these, and others, we can get snapshots of ordinary life in the days of Ramesses II. The scribe continued with his list. Khonsu and Pendua were absent for the private festival. Fair enough. The next day, the worker Papyri was absent, and he remained so for 9 days over the next couple weeks. He had a good reason. The worker was attending to a colleague who was sick. Apparently, Papyri had some training as a doctor. He also took days off to, quote, make a remedy for the wife of the scribe, which referenced the big boss of the village. Of course, with the doctor treating illnesses, that meant that other workers were absent because they were sick. The early winter, the 3rd and 4th months of Akhet, were particularly bad. In that time, lots of people were off with generic illnesses, described as mer, or ill. Sometimes, though, the ailments were quite specific, especially eye injuries. Due to their work, chiseling stone underground with only oil lamps for light, the tomb builders were frequently absent due to, quote, suffering with his eyes, Szpakowska irtef. Some of the workers were quite melodramatic about this. A letter written on a shard of stone preserves the complaints of a man dealing with eye troubles. His name was Pai, and he asked his son to fetch some medicine. Quote, a message from the artist Pai to his son. Do not turn your back on me, for I am unwell. Do not be sparing in tears for me, for I am in darkness, or blind. Even my lord Amun has turned his back on me. May you bring me a bit of honey for my eyes, as well as some ochre that has been freshly molded into sticks. Quickly, get to it. Am I not your father? I am incapacitated, and I am searching for my eyesight, but it no longer exists. End quote. Hopefully the son delivered the honey and ochre quickly, and Pai recovered his faculties. Not every illness ended happily. and the scribe recording absences included more than a few deaths across the year. The absentee lists don't mention the workers' deaths, they must have kept track of that somewhere else, but it does record the passing of family members and friends. For example, a worker named Nefer Abu had a difficult couple of months. In the late flood season, around November, his daughter was sick. Then, 2 months later, his brother died, and Nefer Abu had to spend a couple of days wrapping the body and, quote, pouring a libation or funeral offering for his sibling. Another chap named Seba fell sick from a scorpion sting. Then, 4 months later, his wife fell ill. Then Seba himself was sick repeatedly over the next 6 months. Bit of a dark time in that household, but the scribe recorded every absence meticulously. Finally, the worker Parahotep had the worst fortune. In the midwinter, his daughter was sick, and then 6 weeks later, his son died. Parahotep is listed as absent to manage the wrapping of his little boy, before returning to work. While Deir el-Medina was a small town, just 70 households or so, deaths like these must have been relatively common. And even in a small town like this, there could be moments of darkness. In the first month of Peret, day 15, the scribe recording absences noted the passing of Hormuz, or born of Horus. His colleague, Amun-Emwiya, was off work that day, so that he could, quote, wrap the body of Hormuz. Simple enough, right? Well, not so fast. The death of Hormuz was apparently unexpected, and we happen to have a letter in which one of the local officials orders an investigation. It says, quote, the scribe Pi writes to the foreman Neferhotep and the workman Pen-Nebu in life, prosperity, and health. Behold, a man, Hormuz, died in the house of Horemheb, who sent word to us saying that, quote, Hormuz is dead. I went with my colleague, and we made an inspection. We took charge of Hormuz's body and brought him up to you, saying, take proper care of him. We also made an inventory, which you will find itemized. If you determine that Hormuz was killed, the letter breaks off there, so we don't know what this Sherlockian scribe was going to do. But the idea that Hormuz might have fallen victim to murder most foul is quite intriguing. He had died in the house of Horemheb. Was that worker responsible? Or was this all a tragic misunderstanding? Hormuz went to his burial, and the worker who managed his wrapping, named Amun-Emwiya, went back home. Sadly, this was the start of a bad time in Amun-Emwiya's life. About a month after Hormuz's death, Amun-Emwiya himself was ill for several days. Then, a few weeks after that, his mother died, and he had to organize her wrapping as well. Bit of an unfortunate run. Between the first and third months of Peret, roughly December to February, Amun-Emwiya had to deal with one difficulty after another. The scribe recorded all of these absences and their reasons. It can make for occasionally grim reading, but it's also a reminder of the humanity of these ancient workers. Today, Deir el-Medina may seem like a dry archaeological site, but these abundant records preserve the memories of lives lived, the joys of parties, the troubles of illness, and the sorrows of loss, all preserved in humble writings. The scribe carried on tabulating the absences, a few more feasts and festivals for various workers, some illnesses, the occasional death, but life carried on. There was also the extra work, jobs that were not related to tomb building, but part of the larger local economy. On multiple occasions, one of the tomb builders would be absent because they were, quote, with his boss. It's not always clear which boss, but sometimes the record is specific. In year 40, for example, the head scribe, or manager of the team, was a man named Ken-Her Kopeshev. He was a demanding boss. Across several months, the absence list mentions Ken-Her Kopeshev borrowing different team members. He often had them, quote, carrying stones somewhere in the region. That work could be difficult. On one occasion, the scribe was, quote, causing the workers to fetch stones from the top of the mountains at midday exactly. That record took place in the season of Shamu, around May or June. To put that in perspective, in May of 2025, temperatures of Luxor could reach 45 degrees Celsius, or 113 Fahrenheit. Even if 3,300 years ago the climate was a little bit cooler, it still must have been brutal. Imagine working on top of a desert mountain, with no shade, carrying stones in the hot midday sun. You have to imagine the workers were not happy with Khenher-Kopeshev. Unsurprisingly, Khenher-Kopeshev's management style was not universally popular. One letter from Deir el-Medina records the complaints of a worker under the scribe's authority. Writing directly to Khenher-Kopeshev, the author said, quote, "The scribe of the outline, or draftsman, Parahotep, writes to his superior, the scribe of the place of truth, Khenher-Kopeshev, in life, prosperity, and health. Now, what is the meaning of this negative attitude that you are adopting towards me? To you, I'm like a donkey. If there is work, bring the donkey. If there is fodder, bring the ox. But if there is beer for a party, you never call for me. You only ask for me when there is work to be done." End quote. Parahotep, or the sun god is pleased, had a tense relationship with his boss. It's possible that Khenher-Kopeshev was too demanding on his subordinate, or he may have been using the artist for physical labor that was unsuited to his status. On the other hand, there may have been a larger issue. Regarding those beer parties and not being invited, Parahotep continued, quote, "Upon my head, if I am a man who behaves badly with beer, then do not ask for me. But it is good for you to take notice. I am a man who is lacking beer in his house. I am seeking to fill my stomach by writing to you." End quote. That second part changes the dynamic slightly. Perhaps Khenher-Kopeshev wasn't hostile to Parahotep on a personal level. Maybe he was trying to sort out a worker who had a drinking problem. By putting him to labor and not inviting him to the parties, perhaps the scribe was taking a tough love approach to a messy situation. The phrasing is a little bit ambiguous, but the fact that Parahotep says, "I have no beer in his house," might imply that the chief scribe was trying to dry his worker out. Normally, beer, or at least the ingredients for it, were provided as part of the worker's regular wages. So hypothetically, Parahotep should have had access to the drink. But perhaps between the lines, Khenher-Kopeshev had cut him off, or maybe Parahotep had done it, and he was saying, "Look, I've gotten rid of the beer, I'm okay." You can take it either way, and all of this is educated speculation, because we only have this letter, so we're lacking Khenher-Kopeshev's side of the story. But from his own phrasing, it does sound like maybe Parahotep had a problem, and the chief scribe was taking a tough love approach. If Khenher-Kopeshev was grumpy or overbearing, there may have been some personal reasons for that. One of the scribe's private artifacts includes a magical charm against headaches. The spell addresses an obnoxious being called Sehak, possibly a foreign god, and commands that deity to get back. If the enemy continues to afflict Khenher-Kopeshev, the spellcaster promises to come forth and do battle with Sehak. It's quite a small text, but the fact that the scribe had it in his personal inventory might suggest that he suffered from migraines or repeated headaches. If so, that might shorten his temper in his day-to-day dealings. That's not an excuse, of course, but the fact that we have this little artifact might give us more insight into his life. Perhaps fittingly for a scribe, Khenher-Kopeshev was kind of a nerd. He owned an extensive library of documents, and he left multiple inscriptions concerned with record-keeping and history. Some of these texts are practical, like an ostracon bearing a list of princes, royal sons of Ramesses II. That would come in handy when working on temple walls and keeping the princes in order. Khenher-Kopeshev also had a list of kings from the 18th dynasty, which might be useful in religious rituals related to the royal ancestors. He also had a large collection of papyrus. The biggest one is now in the British Museum, and it's known as Papyrus Chester Beatty III. On one side, the document bears a copy of the Battle of Kadesh story, handwritten by Ken Herkobeshev himself. Apparently the scribe was interested in the deeds of the king, or perhaps he appreciated the story as a literary work. Either way, he made a handwritten copy of the text. Amusingly, multiple scholars have commented on Ken Herkobeshev's handwriting. Apparently, it is atrocious. Sometimes the writing is neat and orderly, but other times it devolves into a sort of messy scrawl, kind of like a stereotypical doctor. In some cases, scholars have said that Ken Herkobeshev's writing is almost illegible, which is kind of ironic for the chief scribe of the village, but there you go. Beyond the practical and historical records and the literary angle of the Battle of Kadesh, Ken Herkobeshev was also interested in dreams. The scribe owned a copy of what we would call a dream book. It is a list of scenarios that one might encounter during their sleep, and the omens, both positive and negative, that such dreams imply. Ken Herkobeshev's dream book is the longest surviving example from Pharaonic Egypt. There are dozens upon dozens of entries, I won't read all of them, but a small selection will give you an idea of how the ancients interpreted the world of dreams. Quote, "If a man sees himself in a dream eating the flesh of a donkey, it is good. It means he will receive a promotion. If a man sees himself drinking wine, that is good, for it means he is living in ma'at, or goodliness. If a man sees himself destroying all of his clothes, that is good. It means a release from his worries. If a man sees himself cutting planks of wood, it is good. It means his enemies are dead." The omens could also be negative. Quote, "If a man sees himself drinking warm beer, that is bad. It means bad things will come upon him. If a man sees himself with pain on one side of his body, that is bad, for it means something will be taken from him. If a man sees himself being bitten by a dog, that is bad. It means magic will attach itself to him. If a man sees himself with his teeth falling out, that is bad. It means that he will die because of those who depend on him." End quote. There are at least 100 entries in the dream book with all sorts of meanings. Sometimes the logic is easy to pass. The idea of teeth falling out is apparently quite common even today as a marker of stress. The notion that burning your clothes represents freedom from worry could easily be a modern self-care post. Other entries work quite well as omens. One line says that, "If a man sees himself catching fire, it is bad. It means he will be killed." Fair enough, I'd be worried too. On the other hand, if a man sees his bed catching fire, it is bad because it means his wife will leave. Okay, that one works on metaphorical grounds. And if a man sees himself carrying off the items that belong to a temple, that is bad. It means his own possessions will be taken. In that case, one could interpret it as a divine warning conveyed through metaphor. Then there are the omens that we might call superstitions. If a man saw himself eating a particular type of fish that had been, quote, "split open," then that was bad. It meant he would be caught by a crocodile. That one's a bit obscure. Why does that particular fish, prepared in that way, draw the reptile? Maybe it had something to do with the hunting habits of local crocodiles? Or a kind of sympathetic magic between the animal and human worlds, as the human acted out his role as a hunter, so the crocodile would act out theirs. Maybe. Finally, there are dreams that defy any waking logic, but might relate to actual experiences. Apparently, if a man dreamt of, quote, "putting beer into a vessel," it is bad. It means something will be removed from his house. Why pouring beer into something would mean something taken away from your property is unclear. I'd love to know if the author of that particular entry just had a habit of losing things when they were drunk. Another entry says that if the dreamer sees an ostrich, it promises physical harm. You could imagine that whoever came up with that omen might have had a traumatic encounter with a large African bird. One of the more unusual meanings is, quote, If a man sees himself dead, that is good, for it means a long life is ahead of him. I suppose the logic there could be that if you have seen your death, you have already transcended the horrible event, and thus you can enjoy a carefree life. Again, though, it's not always clear. On a last note, there are the sex dreams. Sexual encounters happen quite frequently, in the dream book I mean. One of the more famous entries is, quote, "If a man sees himself having sex with a woman, that is bad, for it means mourning or grief will come." You could interpret this all sorts of ways. Perhaps it's a veiled reference to la petite mort, or maybe it has something to do with concerns around cleanliness. Or perhaps if the sexual act was intended to create new life, that might result in the death of an existing one. Or maybe it's something more along the lines of a comedian from the 1950s, women causing grief. You could imagine Kenher Kopeshev loosening his tie and saying, "Boy, I tell you, a scribe can't get no respect." More seriously, the significance of sexual acts varies wildly within the dream book. For example, quote, "If a man sees his penis becoming large, that is good, for it means his possessions will multiply. On the other hand, if a man sees his penis erect, it is bad, for it means that he will be robbed." The sexual act itself appears in multiple contexts. Quote, "Having sex with a woman is bad. It means grief. But a dream of, quote, having sex with his sister is good because it means the dreamer will inherit something. Then there is, quote, having sex with his wife in the sunshine is bad because the god will see his miseries. But, quote, having sex with his mother is good because it means that his companions will be loyal to him." Suffice to say, the logic is sometimes closer to the dream world than the waking. It's unclear why Kenher Kopeshev, in particular, had this dream book. Perhaps, as a literate man, he used it to advise people in the village, a kind of secondary job along with being the chief scribe. Maybe he was personally interested in the phenomenon of dreams, or maybe he used it to work through the stresses and anxieties in his position of great responsibility. As the chief scribe of Deir el-Medina, basically the top-level manager of the tomb builders, it was Kenher Kopeshev's job to oversee the construction of royal monuments. And as we'll see shortly, Kenher Kopeshev did perform this duty during some particularly troubled times. Compared to his predecessors, this chief scribe may have had an unusually stressful career. I hope the dream book provided some solace. Around 1253 BCE, the scribe at Deir el-Medina, recording the absences from work, completed his task. All of the names were now organized, along with the days on which they were absent and the reasons for not showing up. Whether it was enjoying a private feast, undertaking a religious ritual, caring for a sick loved one, or burying the deceased, the workers of Deir el-Medina went through all the experiences you might expect. And records like these, while superficially dry, do unlock insights into ancient daily life. Along the way, we also start to meet people like Kenher Kopeshev, who was, on the one hand, a strict taskmaster and perhaps slightly overbearing boss, but on the other, a bit of a nerd, interested in history and record keeping, fond of a dramatic war story, and, in some cases, deeply concerned about headaches or the bad omens of his dreams. Once again, these small stories help to connect us with people who lived 3,300 years ago. We are lucky they survive. The History of Egypt podcast is supported by you, the listeners. In particular, the many fine folks who have joined my Patreon. I'd like to thank the priests, my top-tier supporters, who give most generously every month, and to whom I am eternally grateful. My thanks to Karen, Erin, Carlos, Jeffrey, Cian, Kate, Alicia, Farron, Andrew, Mallory, Dan B, Sue Yon, Mycost, Erjan, James B, Veronica, Terry, Dan S, Nidin, TJ, Yola, Eric, Andy and Chelsea, Chris, and Linda. Folks, you are all most kind. May your dreams always be positive, and may the good omens come to fruition swiftly. I would also like to welcome Aleph, Scott, David, and Hugh, who recently joined as overseers. Folks, thank you very much. It is most generous. To everyone listening, thank you for joining me. I'll see you soon.